Hey there, folks. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop. It was Halloween this year that there was supposed to be an auction for a certain farmhouse in Burrillville, Rhode Island. Yep, the piece of property that inspired The Conjuring was intended to go up for sale, garnering the attention of multitudes of builders, developers, and yes, fans of the supernatural. But it all got canceled by a sudden mortgage sale, and the house is now currently without a foolish mortal owner. And perhaps some things are best left alone. And it was on Halloween that I intended to do this ranking video. Didn't make it in time, but I thought, why not release it at Christmas time instead? Stay tuned for my message at the end. Ever since it all started with the critical and commercial success of The Conjuring back in 2013, we've gotten 4 of these movies based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the core 4, if you will, as well as 6 spin-off movies that are not based on any real-life events or testimony. And it has gone on to be the most successful horror franchise of all. Heck, I never thought I'd see a day where the Conjuring universe became more viable than Marvel. And that's not just going by profitability. This year, The Conjuring Last Rites grossed more than both Thunderbolts and Brave New World, came close to overtaking Fantastic Four. So of course, after the latest movie more than doubled its box office projections, the franchise is not over. There's a TV series now in the works, and I imagine there will be more spin-off films. But now that there are 10 of these movies, it makes me want to put together my personal ranking video of them all. Because 10 sounds official and I love lists. So without further ado, here's my ranking of all 10 movies in the Conjuring universe. Number 10. Bottom of the pile at number 10, the worst movie in the Conjuring universe for me is The Nun 2. This comes in last place because each of the other 10 movies have at bare minimum one scene that has stayed with me. The Nun 2 has 0. This is a textbook studio film. It doesn't add anything to the universe, it's just another movie with Valak, the demon that takes the form of a nun. It's a specter that everyone recognizes now, so the movie is sure to make bank. But all it does is find whatever ways it can to shove someone into a dark room or alleyway, building to the same jump scare over and over again, and it bored me to no end. I guess when the shape of Valak appears in all those magazines, it's kind of a neat visual, but it just leads to exactly what we think it will. There's a flickering light, so of course Valak is going to suddenly emerge from the pages and grab Sister Irene. But even if what I'm seeing isn't necessarily that frightening, at least I can be scared for the characters. That is the way that horror is most effective. But no, all the characters in The Nun 2 are complete cardboard. There's not a single one that I was the least bit scared for. It's just a run-of-the-mill supernatural haunting that weirdly devolves into a MacGuffin hunt. Valak is after this amulet that's like the family heirloom of St. Lucy, because obtaining it will bring the demon unlimited power. Yes, it's not about any of that crazy stuff like corrupting someone's psyche or preying on someone's weakness of faith. Nah, this demon of hell will achieve its maximum power by getting its hands on a man-forged object.
Well, that's a remarkable display of logic.
And beyond the plain fact that the nun is the antagonist, there's really nothing that gives this movie any linkage to the Warrens or their work. I mean, even the first Nun movie had that. All it's got is this unrelated and really cheesy prelude to Last Rites in the mid-credits scene, when Ed picks up the phone and says, "Yes, Father, how can we help?" Cut to black. Not every franchise needs to be Marvel. In fact, given what Marvel has become, it's wise not to be. Okay, if there's one thing I do remember from this movie, it's this face Valak makes during the climax. That doesn't even look fiendish. That is the most chipper face a demon could make.
Casper, the friendly ghost, the friendliest ghost you know.
This is one of 4 of these movies that were directed by Michael Chaves, and it is practically a crime that he has made more installments in this universe than James Wan has. And speaking of Michael Chaves, number 9. We're moving on to the next of these movies that were helmed by him, The Curse of La Llorona. You know, as Last Rites was about to hit theaters, the pre-Showtime segment with Nuvi had the trivia question, how many movies are there in the Conjuring universe? The answer, of course, is 10, but the answer they presented was 9. In all fairness, though, can you really blame them for forgetting all about The Curse of La Llorona? It is complete, by-the-number supernatural fare, with almost no suspense and no reason to go on even just for the brief hour and a half it runs for. So Linda Cardellini plays a CPS worker named Anna, who ignores warnings from another mother about the malevolent spirit of La Llorona, and because of that, the mother winds up losing her two sons to the spirit. So in her rage toward Anna, she prays to the spirit for a deal that she can have her children back in exchange for Anna's. Okay, so that deal is made, and yet the entire second act is just La Llorona messing around with Anna's two children. Why does she need to spend so much time haunting them? Just nab those kids and be on your merry way. Now, as I mentioned, most of these movies have at least one moment that I remember well. And in this case, it's the scene at the pool with the little girl and her transparent umbrella. That was a fairly creative scare. And it's followed by kind of a sweet moment between her and her mother. Although how her mother is in CPS and doesn't even think of tending to her daughter's wound, I don't know. Outside of that, this movie is a pure snooze fest. It got so boring that at the part where the son is watching the Andy Griffith Show, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be teased like that. I'm pausing the movie right here, and I'm going to give myself some entertainment and turn on an episode of Andy Griffith. I chose Opie and the Spoiled Kid. That one always made me laugh. There's not even any good reason for it to be in the Conjuring universe. The only link it has is Father Perez from the first Annabelle spin-off in a minor role. He's just there to spill exposition on the folklore of La Llorona, and he mentions that Annabelle is what opened his eyes to the reality of things like these. This could have so easily just been a standalone movie. I would say they knew this movie was bad, so they threw in the Conjuring linkage at the last minute to help it sell better. But then again, it wasn't heavily advertised as a Conjuring movie, so why the link in the first place, I couldn't tell you. But Conjuring universe or not, The Curse of La Llorona is an utterly resistible would-be horror thriller. Number 8. We're not getting much better just yet. At number 8 is Annabelle Comes Home. Honestly, I think the most entertaining thing that came from this movie was how different Jeremy Jahns and Chris Stuckman's reviews for it were. This was back when they were often uploading the reviews for any given movie at the same time, and back when Chris was still talking about movies he didn't like, and this was a rare instance where they were completely at odds about it. And in this case, I have to side with Chris. A D+ is pretty fair. This is a midquel set between Conjuring 1 and 2, and centers around an evening when Ed and Lorraine Warren are out taking a case, leaving their daughter Judy at home with a babysitter in charge. The babysitter brings along one of her friends, who goes down into the Warrens' museum and releases Annabelle in hopes that she can commune with her late father. And this winds up bringing to life other demon conduits locked up in there. It ultimately comes across as just a launch pad for a bunch of spin-offs about these conduits, none of which have seen the light of day yet, but considering that this movie was directed by Gary Dauberman, who wrote a bunch of the spin-offs we did get, I'm fairly certain that's all that was on his mind. Now, dealing with what life is like for Judy as the daughter of paranormal investigators could be very interesting, but it's never fleshed out. It's all extremely surface level. And the resolution to the trouble Judy has making friends is completely unearned. You watch and you think, where did this happy ending come from? The best thing I can say about this movie is that McKenna Grace is very good as Judy. I mean, she's a little Meryl Streep. I don't think there's any role she can't play. Also, the most original scary scene is with the ferryman. When Mary Ellen raises the flashlight and the figure disappears, leaving only the eye coins to fall to the floor, that was a decently played moment. Beyond that, not many good scares to speak of. I know our hairs are supposed to be raised when this Viking suit thing turns its head slightly, but frankly, my attitude is more in line with Cogsworth.
As you were.
Nor was I afraid of this ghostly priest that stalks Judy, one who clearly knows he's in a movie because he disappears at just the right second so that Judy erases him from the audience's vision. I never get scared when horror movies do that. It just has me rolling my eyes. Also, my viewing of this movie was the point when I knew I was tired of seeing horror movie characters who have some breathing problem. It has become the laziest go-to cliche when horror writers have doubt that their movie is suspenseful enough. And it didn't stop here. By the time it was done yet again last year in The Strangers Chapter 1, I was tempted to chuck my drink at the screen. And in Annabelle Comes Home, it's not important at all. It gets introduced briefly early on in the movie, and then only comes into play once when the terror is going on. I don't know what exactly it is, but that cliche just really gets on my nerves now. There doesn't seem to be a clear consensus for what viewers overall think of this movie. Some like it, some don't. But I can tell you that I think Annabelle Comes Home can be disowned from this house. Number 7. 7 may be God's number, but that doesn't mean that the movie that takes the slot will be blessed. That movie is the Conjuring prequel, Annabelle. This movie would set the precedent for these spin-offs not having any kind of factual basis, following completely fictional events set before the Annabelle case that the Warrens looked into. And it also set the subpar standard for many of these spin-offs. We follow an expecting couple named John and Mia, played by Ward Horton and Annabelle Wallis, and I think she was chosen for the part for exactly that reason, because both she and Horton turn in listless performances here.
There are things happening that I can't explain.
What things? Baby, are you sure they're not just manifestations of your anxiety?
Oof. Not helping is that their characters make real harebrained decisions at times. Let's just start with the fact that Mia has been searching for this particular porcelain doll to give to her firstborn. Really? That's the doll you've been looking for to give to your baby? I know it's rare, but I'm pretty sure the doll's appearance explains why. And after John disposes of the doll, it shows up again in their house, and they hardly think anything of it. Mia decides, let's just put it up on the shelf in the baby's room overlooking the crib. Guaranteed sweet dreams. And a good amount of the movie is just Mia wandering around her house experiencing strange occurrences, most of which you can see in just about any given paranormal horror movie. There are 2 solid moments. The first is when Mia hears the scream from the neighbor's house, and John goes inside to inspect. He enters the darkness while Mia waits outside, and it's a really good moment of eerie silence. The second is the one that has been generally praised, the elevator sequence. As Mia tries desperately to find a path to escape, just the sound of the elevator dinging is jarring. Although, is it just me, or are those lightning flashes coming from inside the basement? Coming from the director of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, this movie certainly could have been worse, but with a more competent director and more experienced writer, Annabelle could have been far better. Number 6. Next up is going to be the Nancy Pelosi documentary.
Nancy Pelosi, seen here in the recent documentary about her, The Nun.
Yeah, it's The Nun. I think this would be lower on the list for most people. It got widely panned upon release, and it still remains one of the lowest, if not the lowest rated of all 10 movies. My opinion? I don't think it's terrible. I'm not going to say it's good, but it has its strengths. After all the previous movies had been centered around haunted houses, the setting of a Romanian Vatican in 1952 was a nice change of setting. That combined with the cinematography and misty imagery created a consistently spooky atmosphere. Unfortunately, it's just that a lot of the scenes of terror are pretty pedestrian. It follows the template of a haunted house movie in spite of the unique setting, and it uses the same camera tricks that have become predictable in the genre. The camera pans away from a character quickly, and then when it turns back there's someone or something behind them, followed by a jump scare. The lore behind Valak being sealed by a rift with a vial filled with Christ's blood during the Dark Ages was kind of interesting, but the characters who learn about all this and fight to defeat Valak are two-dimensional at best. And the character of Frenchie can be, well, not the brightest bulb.
But we can't close it without the relic. The blood of Christ.
Christ? Jesus Christ?
No, Santa Christ. Who else could she be talking about? Duh! Although I have to say, for a movie where I didn't get that invested in the characters and story, I still laughed with satisfaction when Sister Irene spat the blood of Jesus onto the nun's face. And if there's one character moment I can point to that I did like, it's when we're introduced to Irene. One of the girls in her classroom says that the Mother Superior thinks God put dinosaur bones here to test our faith, that they never really existed because they aren't referenced in the Bible. I guess she hasn't read Job chapter 40. Irene shoots down the idea, pointing out that there are many animals not specifically mentioned in the Bible, and says that God wants us to take interest in the mysteries of his creation. Sure, these movies have always been reverent toward the Christian Catholic faith, but when the topic of dinosaurs and such comes around in movies, the Christian will generally be portrayed as a total lunatic. So I just found that small moment refreshing. So I can't call The Nun a good horror flick, but I'd say it's slightly better than it's often given credit for. It's a C+ horror movie, I don't mind it. Number 5. I think it's pretty clear I'm more into the movies that are titled The Conjuring than I am in the spin-offs, seeing how all 4 of the core movies are in the top half of my list. The least of the core 4 takes the number 5 spot, and that is The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, centered around the famous murder trial of Arnie Johnson, who pled not guilty by reason of demonic possession. Much like The Nun, this movie has the benefit of being a good change of pace overall, and in this case, it's an investigation by the Warrens that goes to a few different locations, rather than all of it being confined to a single house. However, in doing this, the movie has to build its own mythology around why this family was haunted in the first place, and in the process, it can deviate from the point at hand, which is the court case. And for the duration of the search for evidence, I was never really that scared. This was the first of the core movies not directed by James Wan, and the torch was passed to Michael Chaves. His filmmaking style here just can't compete with Wan's ingenuity. I also don't find this really fat, massive undead corpse very intimidating, especially not when it falls down and bonks its head on the gurney. The first quarter of this movie is where it's strongest, because that's when it deals with the historical as well as alleged events, and it is pretty interesting. From the exorcism of 11-year-old David Glatzel, Arnie Johnson's soon-to-be brother-in-law, to how Arnie became possessed and later killed his landlord, it's all pretty spot on according to testimony, right down to the involvement of a waterbed. The only major discrepancy is that Ed Warren didn't develop a heart condition from the ordeal. And that opening scene depicting David's exorcism is undoubtedly the most nerve-wracking in the movie. It's just that nothing to come would ever live up to the frightening standards set by that opening. It's kind of like Skyfall in that it hits you with everything it's got at the very beginning, and then the rest of the movie never measures up. Skyfall is a great movie, by the way, but let's be honest, it peaked with those first 15 minutes. But even the least scary of the Conjuring movies is still worth one viewing when it's carried by the Warrens. Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson always thrive in these roles, and I enjoy seeing this committed couple facing such dangerous work together. And can't forget Ed delivering this banger of a line.
The court accepts the existence of God every time a witness swears to tell the truth. I think it's about time they accept the existence of the devil.
So the first half hour of The Devil Made Me Do It is attention-grabbing. Everything following would be pretty forgettable if it wasn't for the fact that we're following the Warrens through all of it. There's just enough here to get it into the top 5. Number 4. Now, slots 4 and 5 were a real toss-up. When I reviewed this movie, I said it was a tough choice whether this or Devil Made Me Do It was better. But I have settled. Number 4, by a hair, is The Conjuring: Last Rites. I decided to give this one the edge because it is more consistently scary than Devil Made Me Do It. It was once again directed by Michael Chaves, and credit where it's due, he is not just sleepwalking through it this time. He pulled back on the reliance on jump scares and really strived to replicate the filmmaking style that James Wan poured into the first 2 movies. The scenes in the first half of the movie with the Smurl family being haunted are well executed, which is necessary when dealing with a case that is quite disturbing when you read up on it. Members of the real Smurl family claimed that they had been SA'd by a succubus, so I went into the movie wondering if it was going to have the gall to depict that in any way. And I was taken a little off guard when it is alluded to, in a disturbing scene that plays out like a cross between levitation and sleep paralysis. Even some of the scenes of tension in the first half involving Judy are well done, including her whispering of the Lucy Lockett rhyme, overlaid with the unnerving shot of Annabelle rocking in and out of the shadows. So the fright factor is the main advantage it has over The Devil Made Me Do It, but it still has its fair share of big problems. If you go to it to see the swan song for Ed and Lorraine, the movie does deliver on that, and in some respects that is another plus, but at the same time, it's also the movie's undoing. There's so much time spent in the Warrens' personal lives, and it's so long before they decide to get on the case that the Smurl haunting takes a back seat for the greater amount of the movie. And thus, it leaves little opportunity for the Warrens to get to know the people they're protecting, which was one of the things that made The Conjuring 1 and 2 stand out among the paranormal horror genre. I also felt that the movie went a little overboard with its creative license. Not that there isn't plenty of that taken in the first three movies, but it didn't detract from the eerie thought that to some degree this may have really happened. In Last Rites, it loses some of that effect when the movie opens, and right off the bat I'm thinking, okay, this is all fabricated. It goes for kind of a tropey route of bookending all the Warrens' work and writing them to be considering themselves retired before they're convinced to get back into action one last time. And as such, the movie leaves out any acknowledgement of the Snedeker funeral home, which was another major case that Ed and Lorraine were actively involved in earlier that year. Because of all this, I don't think it was a very good idea to make the Smurl haunting into a personal mission for the Warrens. Not to mention, the recasting for Judy is unnecessary and distracting. I still have no clue why they suddenly decided Sterling Gerrans was too young. So yes, The Conjuring Last Rites is too unfocused, and it falls short of being the satisfying finale I was hoping for, but where it does work, it worked much better than I thought it would, and it's just enough to budget ahead of the third movie. Number 3. At number 3 is the prequel to The Conjuring, a description that you would not think equated to a decent movie, Annabelle Creation, about the origin of the doll and the horror that ensues. This is handily the best of all the spin-offs in this franchise, because it has more than a couple of good scares, and a bit of emotional resonance. I bought into the bond between these foster sisters, particularly Janice and Linda, who were staying at this home for girls after their orphanage closed down, and they begin sensing some odd goings-on with the home and its owners. It has an effective setting. Isolated houses with no near neighbors often get me in horror movies, and in an hour 45 minutes, we get the wits scared out of us a good half-dozen times. Even some of the jump scares are well staged. Actually, director David F. Sandberg is generally good in that area, as we saw in Lights Out, and even in Until Dawn, which I wasn't fond of, but it did have a few jump scares that got me good. We get a sympathetic protagonist in the character of Janice. Because she was left unable to walk from polio, you feel that vulnerability that the presence is clearly taking advantage of. Like when she tries to make her getaway on the stairlift. It's slow moving, but it's about as fast as her disability will allow. And through all the terror, the actress Talitha Bateman is acting her heart out. That said, her actions on occasion don't make much sense. Like a scene in the first act when she looks around an empty bedroom, and she keeps shutting the door to the closet that Annabelle is in, while the spirit is repeatedly opening it. Her solution? She throws a sheet over the doll. If she was simply putting a sheet over the doll to keep from feeling like it was watching her, even though she knew it was inanimate, that'd be one thing. But the door just opened on its own twice, once after she locked it. Any kid would be freaking the crap out, but here she is just tossing a sheet over the doll? Well, despite that stupid scene, this movie is still much better than I expected going in. It's a decent horror thriller on its own, and it was very surprising the way it all led into the first Annabelle, a movie I don't even like. So if you must watch one of the Conjuring spin-offs, believe me when I say Annabelle Creation is the one to pick. Number 2. Alright, little controversial of a take incoming. My second favorite movie in this franchise is The Conjuring. Yep, the first ain't the best. But it is pretty darn good. I was 19 when this movie came out, and it was hailed as perhaps the scariest movie since The Exorcist. I wanted to see what all the hype was about, but unfortunately, this was just months before I was able to start going to the movie theater on my own. So later, when it was on DVD, I had to place a hold on it at the library and watch it on my laptop. And it did scare me a little more than I was used to. The zoom-in shot of Bathsheba up on the wardrobe freaked me out the first time I saw it. Oh yeah, and this movie just had to go and make the simple action of clapping scary. The filmmakers wanted to release a cut that would get a PG-13 rating to reach a wider audience, but even with the lack of gore, The MPAA said that there was no cut of the movie that would have avoided the R rating. The tone and subject were just too disturbing. Now, there are a couple of elements that are needlessly exaggerated from the fact. For example, the real Annabelle looks nothing like the hideous model in the movie. It was just your standard Raggedy Ann doll. Apparently, there were issues in acquiring the rights to use the likeness of Raggedy Ann in the movie, so I can cut him some slack there. But then there's the house, the one that was supposed to go up for auction. It's just an ordinary 2-story farmhouse, and in the movie, it's beefed up to be almost mansion-like. I wish they would have considered that sometimes that kind of mundanity is scarier. And I have to deduct some points for killing a dog. There was no need for that. The Perron family's dog died a year before they moved in. Also, for a movie that was acclaimed as a phenomenon in the day, I do think it follows the familiar structure of an average haunted house movie a little too closely. But that being said, what elevates it above your average haunted house movie is that the people feel real, which I think is essential when dealing with people who are real. Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson make us easily buy into the idea that Ed and Lorraine Warren are normal people who happen to have unusual work, and that they are committed to each other. And I really like how the movie gets into detail about just how demonic possession works. And all the members of the Perron family are utterly believable too. Lily Taylor stands out the most as an everyday devoted mother who's suddenly in the middle of unspeakable circumstances. I suppose Taylor was motivated to have a much better haunting movie on her resume than, well, The Haunting. The scene that I have to single out as the most terrifying in the movie is when Christine wakes up to the feeling of getting grabbed by the ankles. And she doesn't go wandering curiously around as children in any lesser horror movie would unrealistically do. She sees a figure in the dark behind the bedroom door that her sister Nancy doesn't see, and Christine is whispering in this tearful, vibrating voice. I fully believe the people on screen before me are real, and I fully believe they are petrified. So while I might not hold it in quite as high of standards as most others do, I can't deny that The Conjuring is a well above average paranormal horror movie. James Wan took the very basic formula of such a film and directed the living dickens out of it. Number 1. Now make no mistake, The Conjuring is good. But it can be better. Out of all 10 movies in this franchise, my choice for number 1, best of them all, is The Conjuring 2. This is a sequel that does just about everything right and manages to surpass the original. Just the opening shot is really well played, with the camera slowly pulling back through windows that have a shape that the whole world knows. But this isn't a remake of every Amityville movie we've ever seen. The meat of the story is the Enfield poltergeist in 1977 London, with the family of single mother Peggy Hodgson getting stalked by the spirit of Bill Wilkins, 11-year-old Janet getting the worst of it. Ed and Lorraine Warren are sent by their church to go check things out, and they go in a bit torn on the legitimacy of the case, which creates an engaging dynamic when they join with the believer, British paranormal investigator Maurice Grosse, and the skeptic, psychologist Anita Gregory. So why do I consider The Conjuring 2 the best? For one thing, the scares are really inventive. The scene in the art room had me just about frozen with fear, as the evil nun's shadow walks across the walls and aligns itself with Ed's painting as a way of spelling it out to Lorraine that they're one and the same. And just the jump scares are brilliant. I saw this movie opening weekend, and I distinctly remember the collective yelp from the audience at the utterance of, "My house." I even recall exiting the theater and taking a sigh of relief thinking, the world around me is once again as it should be. And I admire James Wan's proclivities for making the effects as practical as possible. For a long time, I thought that the Crooked Man was just a digitally enlarged stop-motion effect. Nope, it's really there. It's contortionist actor Javier Botet in costume. But even for how terrifying it is, the core of the movie is the bond between the Warrens and the Hodgsons. The scene that really epitomizes how simultaneously eerie and moving the film is when Lorraine takes a seat on the swing set with Janet. While the actress Madison Wolfe does a remarkable job giving off the vibe that Janet is oppressed by something unseen, Lorraine speaks reassurance to her that you just need to have a little faith and let people in. And even if it turns out most of them let you down, all the difference will be made by just one person who understands you and will never leave your side. Janet finds that inspiration from both Ed and Lorraine's stories of how they found one another.
Of course, he only did it because he really didn't believe me. It took me years to finally find someone who did. And you know what I did then?
You married her?
So you've heard this story before.
And that theme of faith leads to another thing that earns this movie a lot of points. I love the spin it puts on the real-life story. Now, yes, there are plenty of liberties taken. Apparitions like the Nun and the Crooked Man are complete works of fiction. And as much as I may not like to acknowledge it, the Warrens were not as heavily involved in this case as the movie depicts. They certainly didn't play nearly as extensive a role as Maurice Grosse did, or Guy Lyon Playfair, who's not even in the movie. However, the time the Warrens did spend there was still apparently enough for some personal connections to be made, going by things that Janet has said, as well as the warm reunion that she and Margaret shared with Lorraine decades later.
When Ed and Lorraine come to the house, to me it felt like some sort of comfort had arrived for the first time.
It was an extremely emotional reunion for all of them because they remember Lorraine and Ed so fondly and how they had truly tried to help the Hodgson family, not just with the supernatural elements, but just help them as a family.
So what they do in the movie, I'm fine with it. Now, there are things that have given the Enfield case credence, such as a slew of witnesses to the supernatural activity, which includes, as we see in the movie, police constables who saw furniture moving and levitating and couldn't find any wires or anything causing it. And indeed, they bailed on the case, saying it wasn't a matter that concerned them, because technically nothing criminal was going on. But there are also plenty of reasons to be skeptical about this case. Though Janet maintains to this day that it wasn't a hoax, she has admitted that she did fake the paranormal events on 1 or 2 occasions. And as this was a poor family with a single mother, the motivation to attract publicity would certainly be there, and after all, this was only a few years after The Exorcist became a worldwide phenomenon. I'm not sure where I stand on the legitimacy of this case. I don't think anything can really be proven. But what the movie does is take all of the doubts surrounding the case and use it to its full advantage, creating a story about a dilemma of faith. What makes Valak such a ghastly antagonist is that it eventually becomes clear that this demon is the one pulling the strings, and the one concocting all the skepticism so no one can stand in its way. In that scene where the Warrens make contact with Bill Wilkins, they have Janet hold water in her mouth so they can be sure no ventriloquism is involved, but then Janet informs them that the spirit won't speak unless they turn their faces away, raising their suspicions that this is a prank. Now, this whole scene is fantastic. Just that 3-minute shot of a blurred background in which Janet's face may or may not be contorting into the old man's, while Ed is speaking so casually.
So what do you think, Bill? We've given you your privacy. Now come on out and talk to us.
I love a horror movie that can get nervous laughter out of me. But the thing to absorb here is that Valak is intentionally casting doubt on the whole scenario, even while the spirit is speaking directly to the people in the room. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And this is an issue for the Warrens, because they're representing a church that does want to help people, but also wants to sustain their integrity, so they can't be associated with anything that even appears to be a hoax. But when people may or may not be in desperate need, sometimes the solution is taking that leap of faith for them. It's like coming across a homeless person on the street. Sure, they could be faking it. They could just be writing God bless on their cardboard to appeal to the generosity of Christians. But what if they are in need? Isn't it best to take that chance for them? The Conjuring 2 is basically an extreme version of that dilemma, and it makes for one of the most engaging horror films ever made. Now, to bring up one thing that annoyed me on my first viewing and still kinda does, when Janet and Margaret cry to their mom that something's in the house and Janet reveals that she's been bitten, Peggy enters their room, and once she finds the Ouija board, she orders her daughters to stop scaring each other. Are you seriously going to forget about the bite mark you just saw on your daughter's shoulder? Thankfully, this isn't a contrivance to draw the movie out longer than it needs to be, because only a few seconds later she sees that they're telling the truth. But still, that part always bugged me. Anything else negative I can say? Maybe some of the dialogue at the end is a bit sappy.
You saved her.
No. You saved us.
But you believed in me.
Oh well, this movie still kicks demon butt. Fun fact, James Wan was offered a life-altering amount of money to be the director of the 8th Fast and Furious movie, and he turned it all down so that he could do The Conjuring 2 instead.
You have chosen wisely.
Because he conjured up what I consider to be his masterpiece. Out of all 10 films in this universe, it's got the best story, the best themes, the best characterizations, and of course, the best scares. The Conjuring 2 is indeed the #1 movie in the franchise, and I'll gladly watch it every Halloween and even every Christmas. And on that note, this does need to be said. The Conjuring 2 is a Christmas movie. Hey, most of it is set during the holiday. It's all about the warm and secure feeling of loved ones set against the backdrop of Christmas decorations, and it uses Hark the Herald Angels Sing to creepy effect on 2 separate occasions. Eh? Come on. Put it next to Nightmare Before Christmas as a movie that can be enjoyed in both October and December.
This is Halloween, pumpkin scream in the dead of night.
That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop. And let it be known this holiday season, Conjuring 2 is a Christmas movie, you heathens!